Hey, folks, and welcome back to the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we're talking about where and why we are leaking women from the water career pipeline, how to stop those leaks, and even how to bring women back when they leave. And we have, as you know, if you've been watching some of these, sometimes they could go a little all over the place. We have these great conversations, but today we're going to actually go a little more to the book because we have someone who is so incredibly knowledgeable, not only about HR, but particularly HR in the water sector. Erica Gordon Roberts worked for several years with City of Atlanta, now has her own consultancy, and is the DEI chair, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion chair for Georgia American Water Works Association, the association that works with all the drinking water agencies throughout the country and the continent. And she is, we're really lucky to have her here with us today. Erica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited. This is my passion. So definitely excited to talk to everyone today about how we make sure our women are successful in the world of water.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this whole summit really walks people through the entire career path, right? And part of why we did this, there was a World Bank study recently, just finally looking at gender equity, which on the international scene, we know that UN Water is going on this week. So often they look at women and water. Oh, those poor women, black and brown women, buckets on their heads, walking 5 miles uphill both ways, getting chased by tigers and raped and not going to school. Because they don't have water and sanitation in the home, and not so much women actually working in the industry. And that's just starting to change. So what can you tell us about sort of the overall? So what they were looking at is the 4 stages in the career. Education at the front end, which is where a lot of people focus, front of the pipeline. Early career, how do you initially get recruited and onboarded? Mid-career, how do you get developed? The organizations talk about retention. We talk about how do you get developed? How do you make sure your needs are met as you're growing? Ascension leadership. And then we also talk about career reentry. So that is the total career path. What can you tell us about that in terms of women in the water workspace?
First of all, women in water can be challenging, obviously because of the industry we're talking about, but it's also very rewarding. And so when you think about the path itself, you mentioned the very important piece, the education piece.
Yeah.
And people tend to think about the education piece, K-12. But there are people like me who didn't learn about water until they were in their 30s and 40s.
Yes.
And so I think it's very important to recognize that the education piece stems well beyond that K-12, that college age group, and that it's not always in the classroom. Sometimes it's in those community activity and organization events. Sometimes it's those simple conversations, the webinars you find on eVite, just different opportunities and spaces to educate women on the opportunities that exist in water. The other piece is the training piece. A lot of government agencies have community outreach programs where they're teaching you how to be better stewards of water. They're teaching you how to build rain barrels and all these things. But how often are we getting out there and having some internal conversations about career opportunities? Not just for those who are external to the water world, but even those that are internal. So if I come in as a customer service rep for the world of water, do I really know what else exists outside of that bubble that I've worked in for 20 plus years? So that education piece definitely speaks to that. And oftentimes we tie it back to STEM. We talk about, it's got to be environmental science or civil engineering or hydrology. And so then there are a lot of women that immediately become excluded from the journey in the conversation. So being able to step outside that comfort zone. Yeah. Look at me, I'm an HR person. I actually have a degree in English with a minor in women and gender studies. So I don't fit into your typical mold of a woman in water, but because of those education and training experiences, I got an opportunity to take it on. Of course, entry-level folks get a chance to start their career, but if they're only on the trajectory for that particular area of response, of growth, then you miss, once again, the opportunity to create a path for a woman to grow in the world of water. I think about some of the water treatment operators I've come across in the years, and they're mentoring those behind them, and they're talking about the experience and the stories of those before them, and how many of them never made it past that entry-level piece because mid-level and leadership positions did not reflect who they were at the time. And so
Mhm.
they kicked down the door, broken the glass ceiling, if you will, and created more space for representation. There's an opportunity to see the traditional roles that were held by others being taken on by people who are not necessarily of the same ethnic background, age, socioeconomic understanding, or even think about it, generationally speaking, you typically talk to folks who say, my dad, my mom worked in the world
Yes.
of water. That's how
Yes.
I
Yes.
folks.
Yes.
And so that entry level piece and that education piece opens the door to folks you typically missed out on. And so when you get to that piece, you've got folks in the door. But let's just be honest.
Yeah.
We got studies left and right talking about women quitting, leaving the workforce. And it's not just in water, it's everywhere. Top 3 reasons to leave: less stress, more money, work-life balance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you think about the world of water, it's probably in that order: more money, less stress, work-life balance.
I don't know. Some of them are willing to sacrifice the money for some of the others, especially if they've got family obligations. But before we get into that, let's kind of back up a little bit and focus, look a little more at what you just mentioned about the front of the pipeline. And again, not just women in STEM, women in STEM, women in STEM. And there's a real difference between water and environmental and a lot of other STEM related degrees. You can go work in oil and gas, pharmaceutical. There's lots of things you can do with STEM, but this is also dealing with the public sector. So you got to know a little about public administration or law or regulations or economic, a lot of customer service sorts of things, as you mentioned. We've also talked to a number of people in this summit, like Amanda Livingston. She was a 17-year-old mom. She needed a job. She started as an operator. We talked to Angela Walker. Again, started as an operator. Wanted to work with her hands. You want to be outside. We have a plumber that we talked to, Susan Marshall, Jacob Marshallsea, that just loved the work. And for me personally, I started as a government major, had thought about engineering. My parents were like, no, women, girls don't do well at engineering. Went back and put myself through school while working to go back to school for geology and engineering. But you also made that point about the family connection and how often, especially when Me Too started and suddenly all these associations are like rolling out women speakers as they tell us who your mentors were. Well, of course, a lot of our mentors were men, and I love men. I love working with men. That's one of the reasons I went in this field. I like that very, mission oriented. Let's, what's the mission? Let's get it done kind of masculine approach to work. But yeah, that we have, there's all these people who started because they have a personal connection, or started in the labs and then went back to school. You look at someone like former AWWA president Jeannie Bennett Bailey. Her mother worked at the utility, wanted to get her kid a job or just get her out of the house for the summer, started working in the labs, and she worked her way up from there. And that's not uncommon.
But that's the key, though. So the biggest thing for me is, are we providing opportunities?
Yeah.
Are we giving folks exposure? So if I give you some exposure, then yeah, you got a shot at it. But 9 times out of 10, folks don't even get that exposure piece. So if I don't have a family member that's worked in water, I know nothing about it. Yeah. I literally stepped into this space because I was recruited as an HR leader.
Yeah.
Our first client group happened to be watershed management. So walking in, and that was my client group that I served, my office was right next door to the time clock for my wastewater guys. I fell in love with water because I was exposed to it.
Right.
Here's the other piece. I fell in love with it and wanted to make a difference because of the experience. That meant I threw on my hard hat, threw on my vest, threw on my boots, hopped in a truck, rode around town, and learned about infrastructure. And the more I learned about it, the more passionate I became about it. But because I spent so much time volunteering with women and children in different spaces where we talk about exposure and opportunity and experiences, I was able to share what I had seen and said, this is something for you to consider. Have you ever thought about this? Had you asked me that question 5 years before, all I knew is you cut on the water.
Yeah.
You drank it. You flushed the toilet, it went somewhere. As long as my bill wasn't high, I wasn't concerned with it. It was only when I got into a space where I was exposed to water did I learn about all the facets of business. Now I have a 13-year-old daughter. I have an 18-year-old, now 19-year-old niece. My 19-year-old niece is an industrial engineering major. My 13-year-old daughter is all about science, technology, engineering, and math. As a kid, for me, it was all about biology. So yes, we're putting those seeds in play in the school system, but we're not talking about all the careers that are available. Yes, there are tons of STEM careers, and yes, we've got tons of spots to fill. But there are people that are passionate on the creative side, on the people side, on the business side, on the finance side, that can still influence and impact the success of water if they're given that exposure and that opportunity. And so to make those connections, to meet those people, to have those opportunities to really understand what water is and how you can influence and impact it, I think shifts the trajectory of the type of people you'll get and the longevity of what they'll spend within the world of water.
I think that's the breakdown between, so often when people, oh, well, let's talk about women in water. Oh, yeah. Let's go talk to seventh grade girls. And yes, we've got World Water Day this week. There's going to be a gazillion, people going to grade schools and shooting off water guns and, and doing little water experiments. It's like, water is important. Water is important. Everybody saying water is life. Water is life. It's like, yeah, that's important. International Girls and Women in Science Day, and it's like every other day it seems, especially this time of year, it seems like there's something for me. It's, hey, everybody celebrate. It's like, okay, but what are we getting these women, girls and women into?
Well, here's the other interesting piece, though.
Yeah,
I think we're going into all the classrooms and all these spaces. We're really not. We're cherry picking where we go.
Yeah,
we're picking the journey of the girls and the women we want in the field long before they even know it. And so when I hear these stories about, oh, we're doing all these great things, I ask about 3 or 4 schools I spend time with. I'm like, have you guys seen this? And they're like, no. Well, let me connect you with someone so you can see it. Because even though we're touching some schools, we're not touching all. Even though we're touching some communities, we're not touching all. And I think, once again, it's the relationship piece that is allowing us to connect to those particular communities,
right,
those particular girls, those particular women. I spent time volunteering in a women's shelter for years. And it was on a Thursday night, I would just go in and sit and talk. And it was, hey, I've got an interview next week. I don't know how to get prepared for it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Hey, I need an outfit to wear. I know of a women's closet, we'll get you some clothes. But had I not been in that space, that individual would have never had that opportunity. And so we have to make sure we are tapping into spaces we have not tapped into before, because we keep recycling the same spaces over and over and over again. And yet there's still this same group of women and girls who are never being touched, who are never being exposed, who never have the opportunity, who never have the experience. And the truth of the matter is, it's relational. If I don't know you exist, if I don't relate to you, then I never step foot through your 4 doors. I never understand your needs and your plight and give you the resources and tools and exposure and opportunity you need.
It's funny you should mention that. It's because we kind of touched on that before we started recording. That it's a little personal, but I had worked my way up through getting my PhD. I'd worked for a big consulting firm. I was supposed to go work for direct a water education foundation, but had been encouraged to hang my shingle by a lot of guys who said that they were going to give me all this work. We'll come back to that later for all you ladies who are thinking about doing the Great Resignation and hanging your shingle. We've got some things to say about that. But the fact is, I actually ended up getting what turned out to be uterine cancer while being a solopreneur, without a husband, without insurance, and ultimately the only way that I could save my own life was to stop taking in any income personally, turn Water Citizen into a nonprofit. So any money that you guys spend, it doesn't go to me, not a penny, it goes to Water Citizen. But I did actually spend time with a homeless shelter so that I actually had an address, so that I could get the medical card, so that I could see the doctors and find out what was wrong, and then recovering after surgery. And at one point, actually, the caseworker, once I finally got my diagnosis after the first surgery, the caseworker at Salvation Army said, well, you have to be working to be living here. I said, I can't work, I'm recovering from surgery. He said, well, if we knew you had cancer, we never would have let you in. But a lot of when I was in the women's shelter for a while, that was not, so it was this little house in this big campus. When I got there, the Salvation, it's a lot of contractors there. It's women who just got out of prison that are given jobs. And So they're like, here's the tour. Okay, this house over there is for women who've been sexually trafficked. This house over there is for women who just are getting off of drugs. This is for those women who are off drugs. That, you know, da 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 da. You know, this is for women who've been battered. This is for women who have nothing wrong with them other than that they have kids. And then there's this little tiny hut with like 8 bedrooms for women who have no kids. And this is all they have for all of San Diego.
Wow.
And it was a lot of women who had their own, who had professional, had started med school, had college degrees, had businesses. Somebody stole their business. They, you know, or they stopped working to take care of a parent, and then the parent died, and the siblings sold the house, and they had no place to go. You know, whatever. So when I happened to find out about, you know, I'm still doing water citizen stuff, still covering events. And I found out about this Women of Water event hosted by a school that was doing this an operator program, right? So we're talking about where we're getting women from, right? And I said, hey, you know, I hear that you're going to be doing this Women of Water event. Would love to, you know, find out more for an article. The guy goes, oh, okay, well, come see us at 4. We'll do an interview. Click. He's like way out in East County, San Diego. I'm in the city. I have no car. Yes, there are people in California who have no car. And I like had to take public transportation as far as I could go, and then take an Uber or whatever to get the rest of the way there. And we sit down with these 2 retired, or one guy who like had the operator program for 40 years, bouncing around from school to school. And the other guy was an old retired engineer. And they had created a space for this program, and they couldn't find anyone to come out for classes. He said, oh, let's write a grant that says that we're going to recruit women. So they're recruiting all these women. And so I said, hey, you know, what about, you know, there's this homeless program for women. What about that? Oh, no. Oh, no, 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 no. You know, water utilities are very conservative. In fact, when we have new operators come in, we tell them to look to the person left and person to the right. And one of them is not going to make it because, you know, you can't be on drugs. You can't be, you know, drinking. You can't be, you know, as if all of these women were there because of something they did wrong. You know, it wasn't drugs, you know, and drink and dementia. It was death, disease, divorce, disaster, lost a home, fire, whatever, deception, you know, or just, you know, got beaten, you know. And
so that goes back to my earlier point, though.
Yes, exactly.
The opportunity for folks is limited because we put in a box who deserves this exposure, who deserves this experience, who deserves this opportunity. And so for everybody listening, the question becomes, you're the next people stepping in line to be in charge. You're the person that could break that chain. What are you doing to expand that exposure, to expand that opportunity, to expand? You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, to step into a space where we can thrive and grow together. And I think many of the women who leave the water industry leave it because of the frustration of that not occurring. Because there's a realization of, we said we were going to do all these things, but at the end of the day, we're still walking that same straight line. We're letting our biases and discrimination keep people out. We're still suffering from pay inequity. There's limited opportunities for advancement. There's a lack of work-life balance. And you know what? The mentorship that exists doesn't exist in a way that allows me to expand and grow. And so until we shift that narrative, we're going to continue to see this leak. We're going to continue to lose great people.
And where we do have kind of these alternative pathways in, you know, it's set because a lot of these are public agencies. They'll work with other public agencies like the prisons, you know, maybe, you know, if you come in through that way, or if you come in through veterans. The VA has done a lot of work with the water sector, and people are exiting service. But if it's just somebody who needs a fresh start, that's not an option usually, unless you are very young.
Yep.
You know, unless you are just getting out of school. And in fact, you know, there's so much focus on young professionals, rising professionals. Oh, we really mean under 35. I have a woman working with me on this. She's been volunteering. She works with an association, but volunteers in her spare time. And she worked for like 10, 15 years in logistics for Walmart,
Mhm.
and then got into Wellesley, Seven Sisters School, top school in this Davis, scholars for non-traditional students. So she's in her 30s already. By the time she got her degree, she's already over 35. She can't even go to AWWA. She doesn't get the student rate.
Mhm.
She's trying to start her career. So, how do we make it possible for people who do come into the industry in non-traditional ways to take advantage of association opportunities, to have that mentorship? I was already in my mid-30s by the time I got my PhD.
Mhm.
So
It,
it's like you're overqualified, underqualified because of your age, right?
it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I always tell people, because I've been able to have multiple careers in different spaces, that you have to, as the person on the other side of the table,
Yes.
acknowledge your biases and discrimination. So here's the deal. Ageism exists at the top of the ladder and at the bottom. Think about it. When you first enter the workforce, you're too young. You need to learn more. You need to grow. Once you get in that space, then you'll be able to grow. Then you get into a space where you're too mature. You're about to age out. You don't have that time. So the balance between the two is, number one, recognizing that you can leverage the strength and knowledge and skill set and experience of both.
Yeah.
Understanding that education and experience both bring equal things to the table, and recognizing the diversity
Right.
of who you bring to the table. So if I've got a 20 some odd fresh out of college, and I've got a 35-year-old who has only worked, and that's the only thing they've known to do, but they've never worked in this space. And I've got a 52-year-old who's the seasoned professional who knows all the business. And you put all three in the room, you've got three diverse thoughts, ideas, interactions, skill sets. And so you're going to see an increase not only in the productivity of the work, but the ability to problem solve, because they're bringing various perspectives, and you're able to push back and leverage that knowledge and skill of each one. Now, how do you get those three in the room? So here's where recruitment comes into play.
Yes.
I always tell the story when I recruit of making sure that my panel reflects the candidates I want. Yeah. So that anyone that walks in the room can see themselves in the people that are interviewing. So that means I'm very intentional in saying, yes, I need a woman. Yeah. Yes, I need a man. Yes, I need a person of color. Yes, I need a Black person. Yes, I need a white person. Yes, I need an Asian person. Yes, I need someone who has a college degree. Yes, I need someone who has a GED, because each person at that panel is going to bring a different perspective. And on the receiving end, as the candidate being interviewed, I can connect to each person. And as I connect, you will begin to see the better parts of me, because I've made that connection. Yeah. We all hate interviews. I can't tell you anyone that walks in the door and says, oh, I can't wait to be interviewed for this job. But I can tell you that when someone feels like there's a connection there, yeah, you're more likely to find that best person. That person is going to be able to.
You start to relax. You start to open up. Relax.
Yes. It becomes a conversation, not this interrogation. Yeah. And so that's the first step to it. But that's just in the interview piece. Now, if I only saw people that reflect me in the interview piece, and I don't see you anytime else, then guess what? I'm becoming one of those leaks you're talking about. So in the early stages of my career, where's my representation? In the middle stages. Right. In my senior stages, in my retirement and post-retirement stages, do I see people who look like me so that I can see myself along this path and journey? And if I don't, then what's my alternative? And so you talked earlier about pivoting and women making an opportunity to change their careers. My mom jokes with me. She says, you're the only person I know who, no matter where you go, you create a job. And when I reflect on my career, what I realized is I walk in and I see a problem and I offer a solution and I put forth that solution. That's how I've been able to create space in spaces where I didn't exist. So the first thing I had to do was conduct a self-assessment on myself. Okay, Erica, what are you good at? What do you really like? What do you really enjoy? What are your values? Yes. And what organizations, what people, what systems align with that? And then when you do that, you set the tone for, okay, here's where I am. And I was like, okay, so you know what? Let me research alternative career options, because here's the deal. I've always been a career coach. I've always been an HR consultant. I just didn't know that there was a particular space in the world for me to do that. The only reason I realized it was because someone hired me a career coach in the midst of my career. And in the course of our conversations, there was dialogue about, well, you've been doing this your whole life and you do it well. Why have you never thought to do it on your own? because no one ever told me that it existed.
Right, right.
And so to be able to research those career options, I had to be exposed to them. So once again, that exposure piece was there. But then I began to look at the industry, look at the roles, look at the responsibilities. And even for me, HR was not my space. That wasn't a space that I woke up one day and said, I want to be an HR leader. I literally saw an issue and saw where women and young people, because at the time I was always the youngest person in the room, I was the only person of color in the room, were often overlooked. And I said, instead of being a part of the problem, let me be a part of the solution. Let me step into the door and change the processes, change the policies, change the programs. But then I had to sit down and seek advice from people who are already there. Because here's the deal, just because you want to do it, doesn't mean people are going to let you in the door. So I asked the questions. I asked, what was the barrier for you? What are some things, if you could do it over again, you do? And I took that advice and support and navigated through it. Now, I say that, but I'm often known as a troublemaker. I'm often known as the person who does not listen. I'm going to be honest. And so if you ask some of my previous supervisors and previous leaders, they'll say, yeah, Erica will get the job done. She may not get it done the way you want it done, but she'll get it done.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out when to kick the door down and when to knock softly, when to just sit, listen, and observe so that I could take the plan and make it what it needed to be for me and the people behind me. And then the other piece was I had to actually work that plan. So that meant, yes, I'm working 80 hours a week, but this is not my life. And recognizing that at a point in time where I want to shift, I need to be okay with taking a 30% cut in pay. Because I did. I took a 30% cut in pay because there were things in life that were more important to me at the time. But that 30% pay cut ended up being way more than I could ever imagine, from career trajectory, from salary, from exposure, from opportunity. But I had to get out of being comfortable because I've been in the same space forever and was comfortable with it and was okay with the mistreatment because I thought that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. We get conditioned. It really is like, oh, well, that's just the way it goes. That's just part of having a job. Right. And that's one of the reasons some people go into entrepreneurship, because they think that the only way that you can have a job is in a place where you're being mistreated, and what you see on TV and it's accepted as a norm. And it is actually possible to have healthy, supportive workspaces. That's one of the things that drew me to water and consulting. When you're in a great team, when you're with a great organization, oh my God. And you're all pulling together and you're working on amazing projects. And every day it's like you get up, you can't wait to go into work. It can be that great when you're in the right space.
When you're in the right space. And you have to recognize when you're not and be okay stepping away from it.
Right.
And be okay
people have to
stepping away
be
from it.
open to bring you in if you're leaving, especially if you're leaving something that pays more money or maybe at a higher level. I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed for a position and people just discard me off the bat. And I think one of the issues that we really have to look at, we got all this federal money coming in. The federal agencies are hiring, the state agencies are hiring, all the infrastructure money, all the other, the climate money, all this other money coming in. And yet we have a system with these levels, right? And this level is, this number of years experience, this level, this number of years experience. But it's automatically associated with certain age ranges. And it's like the old guild model of the, your apprentice years in your 20s, and you're kind of just doing the scut work, but you're in the environment and learning, and your journeyman years in your 30s, and you're, managing sites and projects and starting to manage teams and everything. And then you walk the tables to become a master, right? And if you don't hit those career markers at the right times, at the right ages, there must be something wrong with you. Or HR doesn't know where to place you and say, well, clearly she's too educated. Clearly she's got too many years experience. She wouldn't want this. We won't even consider her.
So it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that I tell people is you have to recognize transferable skills. I mean, the heavy recruitment of the military is a great example of this.
Yes.
If you don't understand what transferable skills look like, then you will misplace folks and you will have to follow that step-by-step piece. Here's the other part to it though. Who made those rules? and they're so archaic in how we think and operate because technology has surpassed a lot of things in life. You have to recognize that those steps are not valid. They may work for some, but not for every person. So to be fluid and flexible in looking at the person, not the process, is critical in not only recruiting, retaining, growing, and developing, but allowing individuals, women in particular, to be most successful. Because if you're focused on that person and not that process, you'll get a whole lot more out of the effort, a whole lot.
If you can get to that point.
If you can get to that point.
And it's so much harder. You mentioned, just walking and asking people. I was one of those people. I obviously have no problem talking to lots of different people, as you've seen. And so I actually worked with a career coaching program this summer. We're going to hear from Portia Ingram during the summit. And who's my coach of that program, and she's amazing. She's in Houston. And we were talking about, past, other people and other women in the program were talking about their experiences. And suddenly it occurred to me that every single job I had, I got through networking. Through not just networking, cross that out. I got because I was ready to make a change, and I made a conscious point of, I actually, Bernard, you remember Bernard Haldane? Does anyone remember that? This is like the very first guy who invented career coaching back for military back in the day, right? And one of the things I learned there was, it was like I was like 23, 24 or something. I already knew I would move from politics into something else. And so I learned this process where I start reaching out to my network and have these informational interviews. And then at the end of each interview, to make sure I asked for at least 3 other names. And I made this Excel spreadsheet. And I had this is why I know so many people. Yes. I collect contacts like nobody's business. But that works great when you're young, cute, and cheap. Okay? Everybody wants to talk to a young person. Oh, hi, Erica. I'm thinking about going to HR. Would you mind sitting down with me for a few minutes and we'll have a little information interview? Oh, sure, let's do that. But me, I've tried doing that. I've tried talking to people. A lot of them tell me to go get a husband. Seriously. Really? Guys I have known forever. I was like, look, I really want to why aren't you married yet? Why aren't you why don't you focus on getting a husband? And it's like, I would have had a husband years ago. I would have had kids years ago. I just got the career part worked out, but I am where I am right now. The kind of guy that would want someone where I am, financially and everything, is not the kind of guy I want as a husband. I want to be my best self before I get into a relationship, right?
So it's interesting that you say that, though, because people are not getting married or getting married later in age. They're not having kids or having kids later in age. And in either way, those are the misconceptions of defining success. And so whenever I'm coaching someone, the first thing I say is, what is your definition of success? Forget the company's definition, forget the career path. What is your definition of success? All right, so based upon where you are and where you want to be, let's talk through how we fill those gaps. If your definition of success is I want to have this role in 5 years, what's keeping you from getting there?
Yeah.
Now let's navigate through that piece.
Yeah.
We oftentimes determine our level of success by the success of those around us. And if you stop focusing on that and start focusing on what your goals are, what your objectives are, what makes you happy, what fills your cup, then all the other pieces will fall into play. To your point, you'll be intentional in where you place yourself. You'll attend events and surround yourself with people who will allow you to grow. I've always told my friends, and it's so funny because we get together and they're all entrepreneurs and they've been entrepreneurs for years. And they've just ragged on me for years about, when are you going to step into this space? And as we talk, I realize the things that I know they've never experienced, the things that they know I've never experienced. So in just getting in that circle and sharing that knowledge across groups has been phenomenal. The other piece is holding each other accountable. So I'm not comfortable going to this event. Okay, well, both of us will go. And when we get there, we're going to split up because I'm still going to make you be uncomfortable and give you the opportunity for exposure and experience. But at the end of the day, you can look across the room and you've got a partner here that's going to look out for you and it's got your best interest at heart. So even finding those people from a mentorship standpoint, you always hear about, okay, we need to have mentorship programs. And I always tell people, I am a big fan of mentorship in both directions.
Yes.
Because just as much as I can teach someone who's new in the industry things, you can teach me.
Yeah.
There are things that are new to the industry that I don't know about. So give me that opportunity to learn. There are technology pieces that I would love to learn that you are just a whiz at. So let's share that knowledge back and forth. And then there's also the soft skills piece to it. The opportunity to know how to navigate a room, the opportunity to know how to say no. That's a trait that many of us struggle with. And so to understand how to say it and to say it in a way that people are concrete and understand that you mean it and that you're not going to stand for discrimination, you're not going to stand for bias, you're not going to stand for misuse and abuse of my skill set, my knowledge, my education is critical in you being successful. But it's also critical in making sure people stay. Because if I feel like I am not wanted, I'm not valued, then yes, I'm going to leave. And so that leak is going to continue to grow. That gap is going to get bigger. We're going to continue to lose great people.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually went down the entrepreneurial route twice. Once was because it was by accident, because I had been working and going to school and I was in North Carolina and I was told I had a fellowship waiting for me at Colorado State. I probably could have stayed in North Carolina for another semester, wrapped up my master's, finished a senior design project, wrapped up my BSCE because I always had a third bachelor's at NC State. But I had that fellowship waiting for me. I got to get out there. They did not tell me until I got to Colorado, gave up my home and my residency in North Carolina, that the secretary forgot to turn in the paperwork for my fellowship. Oops, sorry, no fellowship. Well, we tried to email you, but we spelled it wrong. So we printed the email and put it in the box. That's how I found out about my fellowship. So suddenly it's like, oh crap. Well, fortunately, having worked as a proposals director, business development, having done project management, I knew how to win my own projects and how to manage my own projects. And when the first one actually was for American Water Works Association, I had been working out in North Carolina for North Carolina Division of Water Resources, and they were having their very first ASR, aquifer storage recovery facility. And one of the things that would happen with aquifer storage, as with most innovative technologies, is even if it's been done somewhere else, well, this is the first one in our state. So we have to come up with our regulations about how we're going to deal with, ASR, reuse, green infrastructure, fill in the blanks. Right. And so, water resources was supportive because it was going to support the groundwater levels and prevent saltwater intrusion. Great. Water quality was like, no, we got this underground injection control regulation from EPA that says anything down a well is waste disposal, which obviously other states didn't see it the same way. So I was actually contacted by the groundwater committee at AWWH to do a national survey, every single ASR site, every single state regulatory agency in those states with ASR sites, right? And so that was one of my first projects. I also got a project from Colorado Water Conservation Board to run their very first ever basin planning meetings. And people thought, since I was in grad school, they could kind of get me for cheap, and they kind of did. And I worked my tail off because I really wanted to prove myself and I wanted to do a good job while trying to finish my master's, do my PhD, pass my quals, yada, yada, yada. But that just kind of happened. But after I left a large firm, I was going to go work for this water education foundation, got a job offer to be a director, but there were people who really wanted me to continue in the ASR space. I'd just come off a National Academy of Sciences study committee, top expert on all this. I said, if you hang your shingle, we'll give you lots and lots of contracts. All right, ladies, if somebody's telling you that, I don't know what I can tell you there. You freaking get it in writing, get the contract first, whatever. But it's very easy to fall for that line about, oh, yeah, we'll give you lots of business. So anyway, I moved back east, hang my shingle, um, immediately ran into issues with uh, not getting paid for contracts that I had done, having to find a prime contractor. A lot of the work that we do is in the public space, and we're talking with Ann Sullivan from Women Impacting Public Policy and Women Owned Small Business. I actually helped to write those program rules because they didn't even have, the law had been passed in 2000, the Women in Contracting Act had been passed in 2000, but by the time I started 2007, 2008, they still didn't have a program. So writing the women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business contracts, how do you make sure you actually get paid? And even if you don't get paid, you can't sue a big company by yourself. And even if you could win, you'd get so blackballed that you never get a contract again. I mean, it's just, there's so many aspects to that, you got to have, if you're lucky enough to have a relationship with clients that definitely will give you contracts long enough for you to really build up your business and everything. But
I will tell you, I
it's
tell
tough.
people all the time, I say, everything you do, you need a care team. Think about it. When you're sick, you have a care team. You have your primary care, you have your OBGYN, you have. So if you think about your career, who's your care team? Who's your person you bounce ideas off of? Who's your accountant? Who's your legal person? Because when you step into that entrepreneurial space, you need that information. You need to make sure you're armed with it.
Right.
Here's the other piece. I'm new to this. I can't afford to have a full care team. Leverage your network. So if I'm providing career coaching to my friend who's an accountant, she's providing the accounting services. So sometimes the old bartering helps to get you that care team you need to be successful.
Yeah.
Because there will be hoops that you'll have to jump over, walls you have to knock down. Have you not had that care team in play, you won't know how to navigate it, and you'll lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts. And I can tell you, your story is not one that's unfortunately one. It's a ton of stuff. I can tell stories of contracts that I thought I had that fell through, and then I can also tell stories of people sharing the exact same programming that I share because they just thought it was a great idea and took it and ran with it. So does your care team have someone who's trademarked? Does your care team have someone that tells you how to handle proprietary information? Do you know the difference in making sure your business is insured so that if you run into medical issues or personal issues or business issues, you're there? So if you're pivoting out of the space of working for others and you're going to work for yourself, surround yourself with people that will help you navigate that and be okay with saying, I don't know.
And there's a huge difference. And I actually did have an entrepreneurship coach and was paying him a lot of money, but he was himself a coach, and he was actually encouraging a lot of the people that he, these personal development programs, hey, leave your employer. If you're personally involved, go start your own business, become a coach. But I wasn't starting a business as a coach. And when you're doing direct to consumer kind of things like coaching, it's a very different business model from doing public contracts.
Absolutely.
And the other piece that doesn't get talked about enough was a situation where one of my contracts, I was doing this big National Academy of Sciences, I had been on the study committee, and my first contract was actually for them to help create a forum to get the results out and to really delve into some of these issues, especially around the policy, planning, permitting, and public perception. But a lot of interest in that. I mean, now everybody's doing ASR. Back then, these regulatory issues were a real sticking point. Well, there was a head of an association who was like, yeah, I can get you money. I can get you money. So he's getting me speaking engagements all over. Every week I was in a different time zone for about 3 months, drumming up support, releasing the results and asking people to come to our to this big forum. And he would then want to say, hey, let's go have lunch afterwards. And he was going through some marital stuff and some work stuff, and he started sharing all sorts of stuff I really wasn't comfortable with. But hey, he's the money guy, right? And then, and I'd even mentioned that at the academy. I said, well, yeah, but he's bringing in a lot of money. And then after the forum, he kept trying to take me out for drinks, and I was like, I don't drink. I can't drink. I've got to focus on getting this done. After the forum, he and a bunch of the guys that he was there with, Like, oh, well, now we can celebrate. Now we're all got, there's a group of us who went to some Spanish restaurant. They start pouring the sangria. They're like practically pouring it down my throat until I was starting to get a little tipsy. And then they say, oh, look at the time. We got to go get ready to give testimony on Capitol Hill. They basically took everything that I and the rest of the committee had presented, written up their testimony, and arranged to testify on Capitol Hill without me. And of course, I was not like able to get out of bed the next day, and I'm like listening to it online, and it was so soul crushing. But after that, the guy kept saying, yeah, we're going to work together. We're going to work together. We were going to do a session together at a big association. And I had a meeting to go to. I said, look, I'll meet you in New York if you want. We can go to this meeting. It was at the Plaza Hotel. Afterwards, I agreed to have dinner with him. He starts drinking. Hands are going where they're not supposed to go. I finally pushed away from the table quietly. Didn't make a scene, right? We're not supposed to make a scene. Got up, walked out of the lobby, grabbed my bag, walked to the train station. I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to make a fuss. I was just going to leave, and we're done. Suddenly, nobody is returning my calls. I was president of an association, right? And he'd actually left his company. And this is something that we need to look at in the associations. There are people who leave other companies, but they can put on their business card, president of this association, chair of this committee, whatever. That becomes their entry point to be able to speak, to do whatever. And he had told everyone not to work with me anymore. And my entire business was built around this. He even had an intern that I had approached and sent him all of my data from that study. And I said, look, I noticed this pattern. This is what I'm going to write about. Just make the table. They took all of that. They published it themselves all over the place. They presented it at the conference. My work, I mean, that hurts when somebody takes your IP.
Yeah.
That's your blood, sweat, and tears.
I am so sorry you experienced that. That is. So I want to say this because I think it's important that you shared your story and that we make sure other people don't come into the same situations. Remember that care team I talked about? In that care team, you also need some legal support, whether it's an advocacy organization or a legal professional. And I will tell you, most people think that if harassment or theft occurs and I'm a solopreneur, entrepreneur, I can't do anything about it. I will tell you, there are a couple of things you can do. Number one, document it, whether it's keeping detailed notes of the incident, whether it's recording it, whether it's emails, text messages, voicemails, save all that information because that advocacy organization or that legal person can navigate you through the path. The other thing, though, is to report it to the appropriate authority. So if it's a trade organization, report it to the trade organization. If you are a contractor and you're working for a company, most companies have a harassment policy, and there's a branch off of it that supports harassment to be inclusive of vendors, and most people don't know that. So report it to that company that you're working for. That's the other piece. If, of course, you're an employee, you will report it to the company you work for, or you can report it to the EEOC or the state level labor organization. But the biggest thing is making sure that you report the information. The other piece, like I said, is that legal advice.
And I actually did contact the association, but it was a smaller association. It was a contractor. It was like a little, trade associations are us kind of, consulting firm, and that he was their client. So they're like, well, it's a volunteer run organization. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah. And
then I actually, when I did go out on my own, I joined Women Impacting Public Policy. We're going to hear from Ann Sullivan who is their lobbyist and government relations person, one of the people behind the development of women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business programs. I actually got to be part of that, testify at Congress, and met with the at the White House. In fact, Cal Penn, the actor, when he was working for the White House, he was in that meeting. And we're talking about developing these programs. So it was really pretty early on, but they also were able to connect me. It was either Women Impacting Public Policy, which is like the policy spinoff of NABO, of National Association of Women Business Owners. They were the ones who were really pushing to get this government contracting done. And the other was Women's Council on Energy and the Environment, which is a great organization here in DC. Yeah, it's like an old girls network of, back when there weren't very many women in energy and the environment, really like they're what, 30 years old or something. They just had a big anniversary. And suddenly all those women that came in early are heads of the agencies. So we could get anyone we wanted to speak. Great, both of them, great organizations, but one of them connected me with a woman who was a lawyer who specialized in this. And again, this is like 2008, 2010. And at the time, what I was told is that you have no protection as a contractor. I'd already finished the contract. So it was basically just him and me, although I had met him through the contract. I don't know what I could have done.
I'll tell you what you can do.
Yeah.
Share that story over and over and over again so that other people don't get caught in that same space. I think oftentimes we feel like because it's happened, we move on.
Yeah.
But there's somebody else that could potentially be exposed to that same opportunity. So, and I say this to everyone that's listening to this message, even if you feel like you can't do anything, your voice is doing something. Saying something makes a difference because you may be preventing the next situation from occurring, or you may cause that person to stop doing what they're doing. But like I said, oftentimes now there's been a lot of shifts. Time has caused businesses to think and operate differently. So the worst thing they can tell you is you can't do anything. But even in asking and making yourself vocal in the situation, it rings the alarm for folks that are having relationships with these people. Yeah. And the other piece to it is nobody wants their name associated with individuals who mistreat, who abuse, who discriminate. And if they do, then it's not an organization you want to be a part of.
But it's so easy for guys to say that you're making it up, especially if they're respected, have a good title. That because years later I ended up in California where this association was, and I was on at a White House, the Federal Advisory Committee on Water Information, Sustainable Water Resources Roundtable, and they were going to do a program in California. And normally I was part of the planning committee. And they were going to have this thing out there. And it was right when California had just passed these Groundwater Management Act, SIGMAs, I think they called, that were, so it was required every single groundwater basin had to do this. And I was like, I should go back to work. This is an area of expertise. They wouldn't tell me who was on the committee, wouldn't let me get involved. And then they finally announced who's on it. Guess who's running the groundwater thing? And when I spoke up and I told the committee members, their first instinct, oh, we want to support you, we want to support you. But then they said, wait a minute, can you prove it? Sorry, I don't go to a body, don't wear a body cam everywhere. We didn't have, we didn't take out our cameras and start filming people as soon as they did bad things back then. And so it's a he said, he said, she said. I mean, you look at the film, she said, right? And this is one of the reasons they bring this up in that film. The film just came out, 5th anniversary of the Me Too situation with Harvey Weinstein, that most of those women were the actresses were independent consultants. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons they really had no recourse. And so,
but to your point,
there has to be a way to make sure that when women are in these situations that there's recourse. There has to be a way for the associations not just to say, oh, we're a volunteer-run organization and we can put comments out that say we don't tolerate this. But then if there's no process in place for someone to go to, I mean, WEFTEC had their very first ever ombudsman. It's the first time I ever saw that at a conference, and I complimented on that. And I actually got comments by men who said, thank you so much for sharing this, because they were uncomfortable with the number of times that they would have to rescue women from guys who were trying to follow women to their hotel rooms and things like that.
Absolutely.
We have to have structures.
So once again, though, that goes back to, there are some pieces that we have to continue to step into place to be able to shift ourselves. We have to become a part of the problem in order to become a part of the solution. We have to step in the midst of the drama to fix it. But then there are also times when we just have to recognize there's strength in numbers in separating from those type of organizations that don't want to address, report, and make things better. And as women, if we're pulling out in droves and numbers,
Yeah.
then we dry up the capability for that group to have the strength to be able to have that negative impact on us. And I think realizing that causes that organization to do one of two things: change the way they operate or be eliminated.
Yeah. Well, I think this summit has the potential to really make a difference. As long as I was just water citizen is just me. It's easy for people to make up stories that I'm a front for the crazy crap that's come up, who's behind you? There must be somebody paying for this. You couldn't possibly know how to do your own website and all that kind of stuff. But, and then people who do have, big money coming in from wherever else, well, they can make fancy, pitch decks and pay their own way to go to conferences, and they're the ones getting all the money. And we have to look carefully at people. And, for people to know, I am in this for the long haul. I care about the water industry. That's why I created Water Citizen. And, it can't just be me and my little organization writing about this stuff and everyone saying, good job, but I don't want to talk on camera. Right.
Yeah.
So here we have almost 50 women and one trans man all getting together, top leadership from associations, sharing their stories, not trying to make the industry look bad, not attacking men, not attacking white people, none of that. It's about, we're problem solvers. Let's solve this problem. Let's get everything on the table and figure it out.
Absolutely. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to be. Here's what we need to do to get there.
Absolutely.
Here's how we plug that leak and ensure that water flows. Absolutely.
Any final thoughts? I know we're running out of time. I really appreciate you being here. Those of you in the audience, keep typing in the comments. We're going to be able to monitor those comments and get back to you, and Erica will be able to see those and get back to you. We'll have all of her contact information. Any resources that she wants to share, we'll be able to show that on that page. But before we go, any final thoughts, Erica?
Don't let everyone else dictate your employee journey. You create that path. Surround yourself with a team that'll help you navigate through it. Be willing to learn, be willing to listen, but also be okay with being uncomfortable and teaching in spaces you never taught before. Because the lessons you learn and the lessons you teach are going to help define where your next step of success is. And only you know what that needs to look like.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Erica, for being
here. Thank you. I enjoyed this. Thank you so very much. And thank you for the work you're doing to help us. I really appreciate you navigating the path and telling the truth to help us make sure our women are successful in the world of water.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Keep coming back. Watch everything in this wonderful summit. We appreciate you. Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.